now been torn apart by violence. How did it go so wrong? This case is packed with unsettling questions, and I'm going to break down the shocking details for you right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, let's talk about Samuel Whittemore, a 34-year-old engineer from Maine who has been charged with the brutal murder of his wife, Margot Whittemore, 32 years old. And it also becomes a question about whether or not he's going to be also charged in connection with the injuries his mom sustained in what is a very bizarre set of circumstances. This is apparently all unfolded at his parents' home back on February 19th in Reedfield, Maine. Authorities are now grappling with the possibility that mental health issues may have played a role in all of this, prompting a judge to even order a competency evaluation for this suspect. But let's talk about what we know and what we don't know. So according to a news release from the Maine State Police, the chilling details of this case began to unfold at approximately 10:02 a.m. on Wednesday morning. And that is when authorities responded to a 911 phone call reporting an incident at Whittemore's parents' house. And when officers arrived at this scene, they made a grim discovery. According to the Daily Mail, outside of the home, that is when authorities found Margot Whittemore's lifeless body, unclothed, lying in the driveway. Inside, they found Samuel Whittemore's mother, 67-year-old Dorothy Whittemore. She was reportedly critically injured. She was rushed to Central Maine Medical Center in Lewiston, where she was initially listed to be in critical condition. However, the reporting indicates, thankfully, her condition has since improved, which, I guess offers some sort of hope, some positive light amid what is a tragedy here. And by the way, police have indicated that Dorothy's husband, this is the father of the suspect, wasn't home when all of this apparently unfolded. But what happened to Samuel Whittemore, the suspect? Well, reporting indicates that he fled the house, but his attempt to escape was apparently short-lived because a state trooper quickly apprehended him not too far away. He was transported to Maine General Hospital in Augusta for an evaluation before being taken to Kennebec County Jail. He's since been charged with murder. At the time of his arrest, authorities hadn't disclosed any details regarding the motive behind the killing. We also don't know whether Whittemore has been charged in relation to his mother's injuries. There's a lot we don't know. But what we do know is that Margot's body was transported to the medical examiner for an autopsy. Her death was officially ruled a homicide on Thursday. However, the exact cause of her death hasn't been released. And that leaves a big question as to what actually happened here. According to the Sun Journal, case documents have been impounded, meaning they're not available for public viewing. So to help me break all this down, I want to bring on family law attorney, former assistant district attorney of Middlesex County, Jennifer Roman. Thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time. A lot of questions we have here. I want to first start with impounding the documents. Can you explain why that might be the case, why this isn't being publicly released?
Typically, when cases are impounded, it's because there's something of a particularly sensitive nature that we don't want the public having access to, at their discretion, basically. We typically see it in a situation where somebody might be somewhat of a high profile person, but not actually a celebrity, right? So the court's trying to balance their own rights to privacy against what the public's need to know is. In this case, those factors don't seem to be at play here. So the potential reasons for the impoundment could simply be that the police don't really have enough information right now. And the case is still so new and the investigation is so new. They want to keep the details under lock and key, so to speak, so that they can do their investigation before coming forward with the facts. There could also be other reasons for it. I mean, there could be reasons that maybe they hadn't contacted the victim's family yet. And because I know she was a native of France, maybe they were having difficulty communicating or conveying information to her family, which would mean that they don't want these details coming out in the public before they can have that kind of connection with her family and explain what they know and what they don't know.
Does that mean if documents are impounded, they could eventually be released? And if so, when might that happen?
Yeah, any impoundment order comes with an expiration date, or sometimes it's 100 years, but there's going to be an expiration date on it. So that impoundment order could be released at any time, could be lifted at any time. And sometimes that happens because the press are asking for details and want more information. Sometimes it happens because the prosecution will say we'd like to have the order lifted. Sometimes it's both prosecution and defense, but it will likely be lifted in the coming weeks.
Is it also that there's a danger it could affect an actual trial, determining what his full charges will be? Is that a concern as well?
It's really only a concern in terms of the investigation piece of it, right? Is the release of this information now going to somehow hinder their investigation? I mean, right now we know so little, right? We know that she was found dead. We know that she was unclothed. We know that the coroner's declared it a homicide. We know that Whittemore's mother was injured. We don't know what the weapon was. We don't know what the motive was. We don't know how any of this unfolded. What, if anything, did the father know? What, if anything, did the mother know? I mean, we know nothing really other than that Margot was found dead.
What a story, right? Look, and the stories that we cover here on Sidebar, I feel highlight how scary the world can be at times and how important it is to protect yourself. And, talking about that is particularly true online, especially when it comes to protecting your personal information. So whether it's spam, identity theft, online stalking, our amazing sponsor, Surfshark, offers an incredible solution to these issues with their alternative number feature. So this service, which is built right into the Surfshark app, it lets you create an entirely new identity, complete with a random US phone number, email, name. This way you can keep your real numbers and details completely private. It is great for signing up for services or websites that you maybe don't fully trust, ensuring your personal phone number stays free from spam. And also with an alternative number, you don't have to give your real phone number to strangers while shopping on various marketplaces. So if you're ready to take your online privacy to that next level, check out Surfshark in the description below or visit surfshark.com/alt-sidebar. Sign up now and get Surfshark's alternative number feature plus 4 extra months of Surfshark. Based on the reporting, based at the time of this recording right now, it seems he was charged with murder, but I don't believe he was indicted. I think Maine is a grand jury state. Could we see a grand jury indictment soon? Why haven't we seen it yet? I mean, and also, by the way, he hasn't been charged with respect to his mother yet. So talk to me about what the charging decisions tell you right now and maybe the lack of an indictment at this point.
The lack of indictment isn't really surprising because the prosecution just may not have enough information to appropriately present to the grand jury all charges that may need to be charged. It also means that the police have to, when they present to a grand jury, they have to present evidence. They have to have witnesses come up and testify to the grand jury, and that can take time. That can take a couple of weeks at a time. So I'm not really surprised there hasn't been an indictment yet. I think that what is likely to happen from here, I mean, we did have this competency evaluation ordered by the judge. Defense attorneys don't usually raise the flag of competency. In fact, they're ethically prohibited from doing so unless they have a good faith basis to believe that their client is unable to meaningfully engage in their own defense. And so this, to me, the fact that the defense has asked for one, he's been sent out for an evaluation, there could be, hey, nothing's going to happen in terms of an arraignment until Whittemore is determined to be able to be competent to stand trial. So the grand jury can go forward, but he won't be able to be arraigned until he's deemed competent and able to participate in that arraignment.
I want to talk about the mental health issues a little bit later, but I'm glad you mentioned that in terms of what we can expect on the timing of all this. Based on what we know so far, we don't know what the cause of death was. We don't know the injuries exactly sustained by his mother. Do you have a theory, though, about what potentially, assuming he is the suspect here, assuming he's going to be charged with connection with his mother, do you have a theory on what this attack might have looked like? What are some of the factors that you're looking at based on the reporting that might make sense to you about what actually transpired in this house?
Yeah, one of the things that really struck me in some of the reporting was that Mrs. Whittemore, Sam Whittemore's mother, had not so long ago written a piece for their local newspaper asking for red flag laws to be implemented in Maine. And the red flag laws are, a lot of states have them. There's states that say if a family member has a gun license and owns a weapon and you're concerned about their mental health, you can contact the police. The police will come and seize the weapon and they'll hold it. They'll keep it safe. So they're called red flag laws. Mrs. Whitmore had written into the paper advocating for red flag laws in Maine. So the first thing that comes to mind to me was a weapon involved. And was it a gun? Because the fact that he's been taken in for a competency evaluation, the fact that his mother not so long ago wrote into the paper advocating for red flag laws, that's a very personal issue. And to me, that sort of suggests that maybe she was concerned about her son's mental health. Maybe she was concerned about his access to weapons. And maybe it wasn't his weapon. Maybe it was weapons that they had in the home. Maybe the guns were in the home and he had access to them. So the first thing come to mind, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if it was a gunshot or multiple gunshots. Terms of a motive, that's always hard to know. He was self-employed, so that kind of raises the question of he's self-employed, he just got married, they just came back from sailing around the world. Was life just becoming too hard? Was he having financial difficulties? Was it harder to establish his business than he had anticipated? That finances can tend to be a motivating factor. The fact that he fled the home after this alleged murder says to me there was some recognition of doing something wrong. We tend to think that planning a crime or leaving the scene of a crime is an indication that you knew you did something wrong and there's going to be consequences, severe consequences to it. So I think that that's kind of telling. It will be interesting to see how the competency evaluation plays out. But the other thing that struck me about this, and I think it's particularly troubling, is that the victim was not dressed when she was found. So to me, that suggests she was fleeing the home. Maybe he went after his mother first, injured her. His wife then fled the home to try to get to safety, and he had killed her on her way out the door, or while she was running away. If he had shot her from behind, that could certainly be a likely scenario where she's fleeing the home and he shoots to her after shooting his mother. That right now, from what we have, is sort of my best guess. And I think it's logical to think that a gun was involved and that Margot was fleeing the home and that he probably attacked his mother first.
It's interesting you say that because, look, yes, are we speculating a lot about what might have happened? Absolutely, including the article. It is an interesting point that the mother wrote this. But I think when I looked at the time frame, early in the morning, was she in a state of undress, maybe showering, maybe something of that nature? We don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Of course, I have to wonder, given that state of undress, if that reporting is true, is that one of the other reasons why there's so many details we don't know about this yet? Is there a sensitivity to it? The fact that the medical examiner ruled this a homicide, but we don't know the cause of death yet, when would we know the cause of death?
So the autopsy, it depends on what the cause of death actually was. If it was a gunshot wound to the heart, or to the head, we'll know that pretty quickly, right? Because that's easy for them, in relative terms, easy for them to ascertain early on. If the cause of death was perhaps a gunshot wound with strangulation, and that the strangulation is actually what caused the death, that's going to take longer for the coroner's department to medical examiner's office to be able to determine. And I think, again, if this case stays under impoundment, we may not hear anything from the medical examiner's office until the impoundment order is lifted or it's modified in some way.
By the way, if she's in this state of undress, does that mean automatically investigators have to perform a sexual assault kit?
I don't know about the state of Maine if that's an automatic thing. I think it probably depends on what the other circumstances are showing. But that could be a reason why they held it impounded. But I mean, they released her name. So to me, usually they hold back the victim's name in a case of believed sexual assault, and impound the file. Here they released her name and then impounded. So it doesn't seem like they're pursuing a sexual assault avenue. But I don't know if Maine requires that in automatic.
And I understand you're not a specialist in Maine law, but generally speaking, if he is being accused by authorities of being complicit in his mother's injuries, what charges could he face there?
Sure. Well, again, it sounds like his mother's injuries were quite serious. I mean, she was in critical condition when she was transported to the hospital initially. So the first thing come to mind is attempted murder. There could be, a follow-up charge after that. Certainly, assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, and that dangerous weapon could be a gun, but it could also be a shoe. If he kicked her. The other things that come to mind is if his mother was sufficiently injured that she's now maimed in some way, there could be charges relating to that. There could be more, they're going to go for the more serious charges. So they're not going to get into the misdemeanors like threats and, threats to commit a crime. But certainly it seems like we could have an attempted murder charge and an assault and battery with a dangerous weapon for sure.
I'm going to get into in a little bit more about what we know about this couple. Having said that, in a domestic situation like this, where you have a suspect allegedly killing his wife, what role do investigators look at? I mean, in other words, do they look at the history of this couple? Do they look at potentially domestic violence incidents in the past? Not saying that there is here, but how far back do they look into the history of this couple?
Yeah, the investigators here are going to be looking at all angles, and they're going to be looking both historically and what they think actually happened at the house on that morning. In terms of a domestic violence history, that's definitely something they're going to be examining closely, because was there a risk here? Were there red flags, so to speak? And because a history of domestic violence or something that was escalating can certainly be a a strong motive for murder. So they're definitely going to be looking historically. I mean, it seems like from his wife's social media feed and how she was sort of blogging about their travels across the world, they seemed like a happy couple. So it does make, but appearances can be deceptive. So there may be a history of domestic violence here. We don't know. There may not have been any history, and this just could have been, he could have literally, snapped. We don't know, but it will be really interesting to see what factors did or did not exist leading up to this alleged crime.
Let's expand upon that a little bit. So according to Whittemore's LinkedIn profile, he was a former avionics systems engineer for SpaceX, the private aerospace manufacturer transportation company founded by Elon Musk back in 2002. The company's mission: reduce space transportation, enable the colonization of Mars. He was also the captain of a 50-foot sailboat, which he sailed across the Pacific, making stops in countries like New Mexico, French Polynesia, New Zealand. His profile paints the picture of a highly accomplished individual, graduate of MIT, a background in mechanical engineering, extensive experience in aerospace and marine operations. And before these tragic events unfolded, as we were talking about, the Whittemores appeared to be living this great life. According to Margot's social media post, the couple met in 2021. They got married at Acadia National Park on September 8th of last year. Margot posted a heartfelt message from their wedding, writing, "Am I dreaming? In the heart of the Pacific, where the ocean breathes, two souls met in a dance of reality. When are we going sailing together? Forever." And of course, Samuel was tagged in the post. From their social media, it's clear that the couple were avid world travelers, sharing their adventures in numerous posts. Margot documented this trip the couple took together back in November of 2023, and more recently, a trip they took together to Colorado with another friend of theirs back in September of last year. Whittemore's final post on his Instagram shows the two of them on some kind of road trip together in a desert area. Jennifer, it's chilling to see this and then think about what he's accused of doing. How do these social media posts actually play a role in a criminal case? Can they be introduced into evidence in any sort of way?
Yeah, I mean, it's just chilling. This is a newlywed. These are newlyweds. They were just starting their lives together, and it ended this way. And I think the nature of these social media posts, certainly depending on what defense theory is going to be, right? So let's just sort of play out some of this speculative, if this, then what might happen. If he's found, if he comes back to be incompetent, competency can come in and out. So
you could explain what that means? Can you explain that? What that means? What a competency? Because sometimes people confuse that. And just to let everybody know what we're talking about. So this happened on Friday. Samuel Whittemore was scheduled to appear in court for his initial hearing. His lawyers raised concerns about his mental state. They cited a competency issue that delayed the proceedings. The judge, Superior Court Justice Daniel Mitchell, then ordered a competency evaluation to be conducted by the State Forensic Service before any further court appearances. So what exactly do we mean by a competency issue? What is this? What are we talking about?
So a lot of times people think competency is maybe somebody who has Alzheimer's or dementia and really can't even remember what happened a minute ago, much less what happened, a day or two or three ago. That's not the standard here. The standard in a criminal case is it's a pretty low bar. It's basically, does the person understand what's happening around them, and can they meaningfully participate in their defense? Now, you might go, well, what does meaningfully participate in your defense mean? It's a great question because it's kind of subjective. And what we typically see about competency evaluation, somebody who might be deemed to be incompetent at any given point in time during a case as a result of evaluation could be somebody who's completely out of touch with reality. They think they're an alien from outer space and they have no idea what they're doing here. It could be somebody who really just cannot articulate or verbalize or seemingly have any cohesive thought processes. So somebody who just sort of can't function at a basic level as a human being. And it doesn't have to be a sophisticated level. I mean, clearly Sam Whittemore is an intelligent, educated person. So we're not talking about could he go and take a class at MIT again and understand what's going on. No, we're talking about like human to human basic interactions. Can he hold a conversation with his defense attorney? When his defense attorney is asking him questions, is he providing appropriate responses? Or is he completely checked out and just kind of like looking at the defense attorney like, oh, isn't this guy pretty? If he's just not grounded sufficiently in the here and now, he can be deemed to be incompetent. And competency can ebb and flow. So just kind of like similar to an Alzheimer's or a person with dementia, he could have a really good day or a good week or a month, and then something triggers it and he's off. He's not competent anymore. So it's a little bit of it's a slippery game here because even if he's found incompetent now with proper medications, he could be deemed competent next week or in a month from now. So it depends on sort of what degree of incompetency are we looking at? What's the cause of the incompetency?
Right.
Is it withdrawal from drugs or alcohol that's making him have hallucinations and not be grounded? Or is it something more fundamentally organic that can be treated with antipsychotic medications or some type of other medications that can control him? Or is there nothing that can be done? Is it just sort of his state of mind right now? So it's going to really depend on what this competency evaluator finds out and what they determine might be the cause of his inability to participate.
Going back to what you said before, how does his history, his job history, his education, the social media posts, how would that maybe factor into the competency issue? And also you mentioned the defense, because I have to say, if we're talking about competency, it is different than insanity. I have to be clear. But my understanding in Maine is that insanity is a defense. I looked it up, says a defendant is not criminally responsible by reason of insanity if at the time of the criminal conduct as a result of mental disease or defect, the defendant lacks substantial capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness of the criminal conduct. So obviously, let's talk about the social media posts, the history, the job history, how that might affect the issue of competency, as you were talking about, or the issue of an insanity defense.
A really interesting distinction there, and an important one to make, that competency is not insanity. And so competency, as we said, can ebb and flow. And competency is really particular to the here and now. And so on a competency issue, we do want to look historically and see if there was anything that suggested that he was kind of teetering or that he was pushed over the edge into being unable to participate in a meaningful way with his defense. But the history may not be as important and persuasive as it could be for a claim of insanity at trial. When we think about a finding of not guilty by reason of insanity or that defense being mounted, it's traditionally and most successful when there is a history of psychotic breaks, there's a history of psychiatric treatment, there is a history of somebody who's really struggled with their mental health for an extended period of time. It's unusual that somebody has some really big mental health episode that happens to correlate with the time of the alleged crime, that would then be found, that they would then be found not guilty by reason of insanity. It's a really difficult defense to mount. And here, where we have consistent, cohesive, clear social media posts documenting their travels and their engagement with life. You have him traveling the world, sailing a 50-foot boat. Like that's not easy. That's not easy to do. Those things are going to work against a claim of not guilty by reason of insanity. Somebody who held high-level jobs for many years. Certainly in the last several years, he's been self-employed. So we don't really know how successful or not successful he was in the self-employment field, but he does have a long track record of being engaged, with large companies and as an engineer and using those skills. So right now, from what we're seeing, there's not really nothing to suggest that there would be a good not guilty by, a good insanity defense right now. More might come out. Maybe there is a history of hospitalizations that we don't know about. I mean, if you look at his booking photo that was put online, he's kind of smiling. It's creepy. It's disturbing. And that to me, I saw that, and then I heard, that he's being sent for an evaluation. I was like, that kind of makes sense. I mean,
and they have to make sure he's not malingering, right? Faking symptoms to get a defense that would ultimately result in him maybe not getting prison time, but mental health treatment. How do they detect malingering? And again, not saying that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, we don't know that's happening.
But how does that work?
So they have, a lot of the tests that psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists and mental health counselors administer are designed to see how deep is the issue running. Is it truly an organic issue? And so they have tests that can evaluate for that, but we also have the issue of time. Nobody who's of a healthy mindset wants to be held in a psychiatric hospital. Okay. Yeah. It is not a pleasant place to be, and they don't want to stay there. So it's, if he is, I don't think we don't know anything that suggests that he's malingering or creating these symptoms, but certainly there are tests and ways for the physicians and the treatment team to assess that. And a lot of what they're doing is a historical look, right? They're talking to family members, they're talking to friends, they're looking at whatever data can come their way to sort of see what might have been a trigger, if there was a trigger, because that will help them understand how to treat it. Sort of what's going on, what led to this horrific scene, and somebody losing their life in a really tragic way, a young woman losing her life in such a tragic way. They really are sort of looking and trying to piece together all the details, much like the police are trying to figure out what actually happened. The psychiatric team around him is looking to see what are the pieces of his mental health history, because that could influence their treatment of him.
Yeah. And look, for now, he's going to remain held without bail in jail. It was reported that the prosecutor had requested a bail hearing, but it was delayed until his competency was evaluated. We'll keep a careful eye on this because there's still so many questions we have about it. Jennifer Roman, thank you so much for coming